Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. In these last days, we mentioned how loving kindness, we've been reciting loving kindness teachings a lot in the pujas, how loving kindness ripens in upekkha, in serenity or equanimity, upekkha. Also how metta, particularly in its quality of acceptance, is a basis for insight. And in that same respect, in the Metta Sutta itself, the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the last verse, the last 4 lines indicate how metta ripens as non-grasping. So we've recited English quite often in the Pali this evening. So those last 4 lines, many of you will probably have noticed either now or in the past, how the Metta Sutta changes gear. There's a kind of shift in that last passage, where the main part of the sutta, the discourse, is about loving kindness and spreading that kindness over the entire world, even as a mother protects with her life, her child, her only child, and so on. But the last 4 lines, there's a change, as in a number of the Buddha's teachings, then there's a kind of, an opening up to a different dimension or a different quality with the most refined part of the teaching. So those last 4 lines are, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desire, is not born again into this world. Ditincha anupagamma silawa dasanena kamesu vinaya getang nahijatu gabbasayang punareti ti. So that probably you've noticed this, but there's a change of tone, and it's all about not grasping. And one of the ways that I like to consider this is that in that last verse, the Buddha is speaking about the 4 kinds of upadana, the 4 kinds of grasping that he lists in other places. And these are, they come in mentioned in different orders. In this sutta, it starts off with ditti. So the first, in this respect, is dit upadana, grasping at views and opinions. And so that just to list the 4, you have dit upadana, grasping views and opinions, silabat upadana, grasping at conventions, practices and rituals, conventional say behaviors. Then kame suvinaya getang, kamupadana, grasping at sense pleasure. And then the last one, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, and so on, is representing attavad upadana, the grasping out at self, the attavada. Now, Theravada is the way of the elders, attavada is the way of the self. So attavad upadana is the 4th of these kind of graspings. So you have titupadana, silabat upadana, kam upadana, and attavad upadana. So in reading that last verse, it seems to be, the Buddha is talking about how loving kindness in its fulfillment is sort of takes the most sort of profound and complete kind of loving kindness is to let go of these different dimensions of grasping. So in this list, you have ditincha anupagamma, by not holding to fixed views, so that this is something that is, say, very much a part of human life, and We don't have to look very far outside the family, the workplace, the political arena, the sports field, even monasteries. Opinions about Dhamma practice. What's the right practice? What's the wrong practice? Who's a good teacher? Who's a bad teacher? Which political party is the best party? Which is the worst? Which of your family members are respectable, and which ones are not respectable? We form opinions, ditthi, opinions about the way life works, opinions about each other, opinions about politics, sport, livelihood. I could make a long, long list. Fill in the gaps yourself. So attaching to opinions, views and opinions, this is something that it's the kind of downside of having a lot of intelligence or a high degree of education, because when you spend a lot of time in school, university, and you develop dialectical skills, arguing very successfully, you can make an argument for anything. And this kind of school I went to, we actually had a debating society, and it was to learn your skills at arguing, and you'd be given a title. You didn't even have any opinion about it, but you say, okay, the theme for this debate is it would have been better if Napoleon had won the Battle of Waterloo instead of the Duke of Wellington. Okay, you defend it and you oppose it, and then you'd have to, on the spot, make arguments and have a debate. So it's like developing debating skills. And then if you won the debate, it was because your argument was watertight, not because you were correct, but you could make a point, you could prove it. And this is the kind of thing that many British politicians have been through, learning at their schools and universities and along the way. I'm sure other countries as well. So when you have a high degree of education and you have a quick mind, then you don't think that you have opinions. You think you know the facts. I speak from personal experience. And so growing up, I would frequently find myself getting into discussions / arguments with people. And then it would be quite common to say, this is a fact, this is a truth, and if you think differently, you're wrong. And so that's the kind of conditioning that we have this strange belief that if we think something, we assume it's true. If other people think differently, they might be good people, but they're wrong. And often we take that as a basis. I'm right, you're wrong. If you think differently, if you agree with me, then you're a wise person. Very smart. This guy's really clever. He agrees with everything I say. It's pretty conceited, if you think about it. But so I didn't really have a perspective on this at all until I first went to Wat Pa Nanachat. And as I mentioned, and probably many of you know, I had no background in Buddhism before entering Wat Pa Nanachat. I'd been along to one weekend of teachings by a Tibetan Lama in London when I was a student. A friend of mine at the college that we were attending was enthusiastic about Tibetan Buddhism, and he said, "Oh, this great Lama is coming to London. You got to come along." So I went along with my friend and attended these teachings, but went straight over my head and didn't really arouse any faith at all. Didn't make me go to a bookshop and find any Buddhist books, and didn't rouse any interest in Buddhism at all. So I technically had contact with Buddhism before walking into Wat Pa Nanachat, but that was it really, just that one contact with a Tibetan Lama in London when I was a hairy student. So when I arrived at Wat Pa Nanachat, it was only about 6 months after I'd finished university, so still in that kind of intellectual arena in my thinking. And so I would naturally get into discussions with the other monks and novices, the Pakaos, and couldn't talk with the lay people because they only spoke Isan. So but talking with the other Westerners living in the monastery, frequently getting into discussions. And I began to notice they kept using this phrase, well, that's just views and opinions. And I would say, that's not an opinion, it's a fact. And they say, well, it's your opinion that that's a fact. But it is just an opinion. And I kept hearing this over and over again. And I'd never really heard that kind of phrase used in that way, like just views and opinions, because I was more familiar with the idea of like that if you think something, it's true. And this was a bit annoying how I kept coming up against this. It's just views and opinions in a kind of dismissive way, like where I felt I was arguing my points very well and proving that I was right, and that these weren't opinions, these were facts. But then I began to notice, after I'd been there for 3 or 4 weeks, 6 weeks or so, that because this kept coming up in conversation, and I began to see how, hang on a minute, what I see as being true now is different from what I thought was true 6 weeks ago. So if I'm right now, I must have been wrong then. Oh, so if I think it, it's not necessarily absolutely true. If you can follow the logic, that my perspective is changing. It's in a state of change, and it began to dawn on me that, I think I know what they're talking about. That I have the impression that this is true, that this is a fact. But actually, this is just an idea or a piece of information that I interpret in a certain way. I like this idea. I feel this is true, but that is necessarily something that's in a state of change. It's not completely reliable. It's also kind of interesting that the word fact, this is to do with English language, going to English language, the word fact comes from the Latin word facere, which means to construct. Like a factory is where you make things, rongan. So a fact is a constructed item. It's something that's put together, like sankhara, it's sankata, it's formed. So a fact, the word fact doesn't mean an absolute reality. It means something that's been put together. So, this is an interesting fact. So clinging to views and opinions, this is a very, say, significant source of conflict in the family, in the workplace, in society, in the world. That sense of I'm right, you're wrong. And the more that the mind takes the opinions and views that arise in the mind as somehow absolute truths, absolute realities, then necessarily we're going to be in conflict with other people, that we won't respect their point of view, or we'll think, well, they're a nice person, but they're just wrong. So it feeds that quality of conceit and separation and division, and is the cause for conflict and taking up weapons and fighting with each other, either verbally or physically, getting into arguments. So it doesn't mean to say that we don't have perspectives or valuable things to say, but when there's a ditthi, a view, an opinion, if we remember that ditthi is necessarily something that is formed, it's sankata, it's conditioned, it seems true and real and valuable from this perspective, but how could that be the same for everyone? Just like if I hold my hand up like this and I say, I am pointing to the left. From where I'm sitting, my finger is pointing to the left. From where you're sitting, you say, no, Ajahn, it's pointing to the right. No, how could you be so stupid? It's pointing left. I can see it. It's right here in front of me. And you say, no, Ajahn, I can see it too. You're pointing to the right, because literally of our different points of view, the different place we're seeing things from. So we're both correct, but we come up with a completely opposite answer. So that's a clue when we're trying to work out our differences, our conflicts with people in the family, people in the workplace, people in society, other people in the monastery, or in the meditation center, that we are, greatly benefited by recognizing that our opinions, any kind of thought, is a convenient fiction. It's an approximation. It's a way of speaking, of referring to our experience. And the more that we can do this, the more we can recognize that, well, in this mind, in this moment, this is the way that it seems, that this seems to be true and valuable and real, but everyone else is going to be seeing things differently. We were talking about the color blindness the other day, and how I'd say have conversations with Ajahn Dhamma about red and green. And he said, but actually, but it really is, this really is green and that really is red. And he would give you this look like, But because those words have no meaning for him. He's never experienced a contrast. He doesn't know what those colors are from other people's perspectives. But we might, from our conceited point of view, say, no, but it really is red and it really is green. Those are the real colors. It's just he can't see them. So an example that came to mind is that some insects and birds can see more ultraviolet than humans can. And so that you might see a flower and it might look as though the petal of that flower is just an even yellow color. If you're a certain kinds of insect, that's not just yellow. There's a whole extra pattern of violet on there that we humans can't see, but the insects or the birds can see. That the little kind of landing strip for the pollen is, the nectar is down this way. So we humans can't see that, but the insects can. So we might say, yeah, but I'm seeing the real flower. It's just yellow because I'm me. I'm seeing the real thing because this is what I see. It's like, well, no. Why should our version of reality be the defining one? So this takes quite a lot of humility, and that when we are letting go of views and opinions, humility, that sense of not being proud or inflated or conceited, that's extremely valuable. We need to be humble, because sometimes many of you have probably found yourself in a situation, you're in a discussion / argument, and you get to the point where you realize, oh, she's right and I'm wrong, but you don't want to back down because you don't want to lose the debate. You don't want to lose the argument. You know the other person is correct, but you stay with it because, and you keep making your point. You keep arguing because I want to be right, because it's damaging to the ego to say, actually, what you're saying makes perfect sense and I'm an idiot. Yeah, you've got it right and I've got it wrong. So I would say that if we are cultivating wisdom and letting go of clinging to views and opinions, then that humility of recognizing, oh, actually, you're right. I wasn't seeing the picture clearly. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be corrected by you. So that takes a lot of letting go of ego. But I would recommend, if we want to find peace and harmony in our lives, that's an important quality to develop. So all of these different kinds of clinging, you could spend a whole evening Dhamma talk on, but I'll go through them bit by bit. So the next one, so in this last verse, ditincha anupagama silava dasanena. So the silapata paramasa, clinging to views and about religious rituals, clinging to rites and rituals, practices. So that is one of the obstacles to enlightenment. It's the third of the samyojana, the obstacles to enlightenment. So the first one is sakaya ditti, self-view. The second one is vichikicha, skeptical doubt, and the third one is silapata paramasa. So the silapata paramasa literally means the wrong grasping of virtue. Sila meaning virtue. It also means the wrong grasping of practices like bowing, chanting, wearing robes, shaving your head, bathing in the river Ganges, being baptized as a Christian, being born as a Jew or a Muslim, these kind of religious structures that are part of the human world. But that is a fairly narrow area. And Luang Por Chah would always emphasize that attaching to conventions is broader than just religious conventions about how you should bow, how you should chant, the way you should wear your robes, and so on and so forth. But he would say that this Silapata Paramasa, that Silapat Upadana, clinging to conventions, it's also the conventions about what is polite in society, what is the right way to eat your food, what is the appropriate clothing to wear, what is money, what is the correct side of the road to drive on. He would point out, these are all conventions. These are samuti satcha, that we as human beings create a convention. Say in Thailand, you follow the British method, you drive on the left. And so that in Britain, we drive on the left, you cross over to France, Germany, and on the continent, you drive on the right. So the convention is different in different countries. When I was growing up, both my parents, they were the kind of not what they call nominal Church of England Christianity was the family religion. My father would never ever go to church. My mother virtually never. But the main religion of the family was table manners. That was the main sila, was like proper table manners, and that how you hold a knife and fork, and the order in which you use the knives and forks and all these kind of things. I'm not kidding. So if I was, I would tell you. But so that the idea of say taking your fork in your right hand and then using your fork in your right hand to lift up the peas on your plate in the scoop of the fork and then putting it in your mouth. Absolutely unthinkable. Absolutely unthinkable. Even though the peas will roll off the back of your fork, the fork is always in the left hand, the knife is always on the right hand. And if you have peas in your food, then all of the peas have to go onto the back of the fork before they go in your mouth. That's the way you eat. Knife in the right hand, fork in the left hand. And the kind of practice of cutting your food up with your knife, then putting the knife down on the plate, and then taking the fork with your right hand, that's the sort of thing Americans do. Is what we were told as little children. Like, don't do that. It's absolutely appalling. When you spread butter on your toast, you always have the edge of the blade of the knife towards you, but you move it away from you. In Thailand, you have the same practice. Never cut towards you, but you always have the blade towards you. And don't, whatever you do, try to spread the butter or the jam with in the other directions. This is the kind of Silapata Paramasa of our family table. And even though, again, my father never went to church on a Sunday lunch was the kind of prime ritual of the week. And so as a kind of rebellious teenager, I would sometimes show up to our Sunday lunch still in my pajamas or my hair kind of all over the place. And they have these little family discussions, heated family discussions about what was correct and not correct to be wearing at Sunday lunch. So why is it okay for Saturday but not okay for Sunday? Ridiculous. But that was the convention. So I'm not trying to make fun of my dad. I'm just saying these are important things in the family sila, in the family conventions. Probably all of you are thinking, oh yeah, right. Well, you know, my mum says, you know, she's really fussy about this. You should wear the dress like that. You shouldn't wear it like this, you know. And that the attachment to conventions is again a source of great conflict. How things should be done and they shouldn't be done. Bowing correctly, bowing incorrectly. The mind takes the conventions that we have and turns them into absolute goods. This is what you should do, and that's right. And if you don't do it this way, that's wrong, that's bad, that's inappropriate. That's what the Americans do, or the French, or the northern Thais do it this way. In Bangkok we do it like this. That's a kind of Isan thing. So anyway, the kind of pride and conceit and division easily comes, as you can tell, from attaching to conventions. So Luang Por Chah would talk a lot about this, and particularly the strength of customs. And when he came to the West for the first time, he was really fascinated. He's a very creative and reflective person, and he was fascinated by the differences of conventions. He'd never seen anyone shake hands before, except in some old movies. When he was a little lad growing up in Bangkok, they would have Western movies dubbed in kind of a more Lum style by Isan speakers, because they would kind of guess what the plot was, and they'd have people doing live commentary, making the voices for the characters on the screen. But so he'd seen in a few movies people shaking hands, but he didn't really know what that was. So when he went to England for the first time in 1977, then Ajahn Sumedho was explaining to him that when people greet each other, so it was always the right hand, two right hands, and you shake like that. So it's always the right hand. Okay, so and then men shake hands with women. Oh yes. And they shake hands with women. Shake hands with women. Yes, mostly. So it's completely new to him. But he wanted to learn what the conventions were. Well, shouldn't really shake hands with a woman. So what can we do instead? Can we make Anjali like this? Yeah, I think you're a Buddhist monk, you'll get away with that. So it was completely new territory. Whereas growing up in the West, the shaking hands is completely ordinary. He was also impressed by the different body language people had, and that say in Thailand the head is very sacred, so you'd never touch anyone on the head. There wasn't like a relative or a kind of a little child or something. And when he came back to Wat Pah Pong, when one Dhamma talk, he said, in the West, people sit in meditation together. When the meditation's over, they might go and pat each other on the head. He said, and in Thailand, we think, well, that's outrageous. You can't do this as a stranger. You don't really know that person that well. And he said, if you went up to someone on the street and patted them on the head, they'd, punch you in the nose. So they get really angry. But really, a head isn't that much different from a cabbage, from a galampi. Just tapping somebody on the head is just like tapping a cabbage. And even just reading the words in the book, you can still almost hear the intake of breath. Wat Pah Pong, when Luang Por Chah is saying the head is like a cabbage, you can't say that. But that's what he thought. Hey, well, why is it so different? It's just that's their convention. It's not. It's just a hand tapping a kind of round, hardish object. Head, cabbage, same. What's the big difference? So he was fascinated by what was, say, polite and good and proper in Thailand, and people didn't even see in the West, and what was say proper and appropriate in the West that would be very strange to Thai people. So getting on the train and people hiding behind the newspaper, nobody talking, sitting on the train with holding up the newspaper. Oh, no one's talking to each other. These kind of things. So attachment to conventions, again, seeing where the mind says it should be done this way. This is the right way to do it. That's wrong. This is beautiful and appropriate. That's ugly and improper. We have the precepts, the sila, the 5 precepts as a basic guideline, but within that, it's very, very helpful to have that reflective attitude that says, well, why do I call that wrong? Why do I call this beautiful? Why do I call this proper and that improper? Yeah, who says? Why should what I'm used to be what is correct, and what somebody else does is incorrect? And every society has all kinds of conventions that we use. Just like in the West, certainly in England, the way you tie a tie. Neckties always seem very strange to me, but there's a whole kind of symbolism about your tie, and the kind of knot that you use, and that if you come from a certain level of society, you'd always use a certain kind of knot. If you're a Haiso person, you'd never use a Windsor knot. You use the ordinary conventional knot. What's called a Windsor knot with a double loop is more low class people would do that, trying to look smart. So don't ever use a Windsor knot. It won't open any doors for you. So that look around in your life, in your home, in the workplace, in the family, see where the conventions are that you're attached to, that you call right and good and proper, and to question that, challenge that, to say, well, why do I call this good? Why do I call that beautiful? It's just the conventions of our society. Like say in the forest monastery, Wat Pa Ban Tat, Lungdam Mahabur's monastery, they never use a spoon. Using a spoon, the monks never ever use a spoon to eat their food with. It's always to eat with your hand. The only thing you're allowed to use a spoon for is ice cream, apparently, at Wat Ban Tat. Ice cream, a spoon for ice cream. Otherwise, spoons are completely forbidden. But at Wat Pah Pong, which is an equally strict monastery, spoons are totally ordinary. So you have to, is this a spoon place or a non-spoon place? What's the convention? Or that, if you are a Ban Tat monk and you see somebody, a Wat Pah Pong monk, just picking up a spoon to eat his food. Oh, yeah, how awful, how terrible. Yeah. And that or the Wat Pah Pong monks sort of looking at the Ban Tat monks like, they don't even crochet their bowl covers. Their bowl covers are just made of cloth. What kind of forest monks are these? They can't even crochet. Yeah, no good. We crochet our bowl covers. We do. We're the Wat Pah Pong. We are crochet artists. So, the yam that I have, the shoulder bag, that was crocheted by Luang Por Sumedho. Ooh. He's a really good crochet artist. So it's like, okay, but it's just a convention. What makes crochet better than sewn cloth? It's just the Siddhapata Baramasa. Say, no, well, we're good. We crochet our bowl covers, not like that lot. So translate that into your own lives, in the workplace, in the office, the hospital, the family conventions. And when we recognize, this is just a human agreement, there isn't really anything there. That's where we're letting go of that Siddhapata Baramasa, that baptism by water on your forehead doesn't make you by convention, it makes you a Christian for the rest of your life. In actuality, it just gives you a wet forehead as a baby. That's all. Or bathing in the Ganges by the Hindu convention, that might wash away your bad karma. Actually, is, I would say, personally, it's just a dip in the Ganges, just bathing in the Ganga. That's all. The mind adds on these values and meanings, and that letting go of convention doesn't mean that we don't use conventions. We still dress put our robes on. If I had my Jiew over my right shoulder instead of the left one, the other monks said, Venerable Chandasara, Ajahn Amaro's got his robe on the wrong shoulder. How do you even do that? What is he doing? He's crazy. He's lost the plot. He's completely mad. He's put his robe over the wrong shoulder, but left shoulder, right shoulder, big deal. We just say, this is what we do in Buddhist tradition. Robes over the left shoulder, not just over the right shoulder. That's what the kind of things that other lot do, the Hindus or the Bonpos, we do robes on the left shoulder. That's right. That's correct. So that it's just a piece of cloth. It's just a human body. What makes the rightness or the wrongness? It's just human agreements. So the mind that can really see, this is just an agreed model. That's all. It can't be more than that. Then our life gets a lot more spacious. There's a lot more ease and freedom. When one of the good examples of this, so probably many of the Thai people know on alms round, particularly in this kind of season, the hot weather, when the monks are walking back from the village, when you've left the village and you're just about to enter the monastery, then in some monasteries it's quite okay to hitch your robe up onto your shoulder and let some air kind of circulate around by your skin because you're really hot and sweaty. And so this was an issue at Wat Pah Pong. Should it be allowable for monks to hitch their robes up and let a bit of air circulate, or should you have your robes fully over both shoulders all the way back into the monastery till you get back into the Rong Chan, the eating hall? So one of Luang Por Chah's senior monk disciples was absolutely fixed on, no, you should have your robes, you should only sloppy and shameless monks, the Alachi monks, would hitch their robe up over their shoulder. Only shameless, sloppy, bad monks would hitch their robe up after they left the village. Good monks always have their robes on all the way into the hall. So Luang Por Chah knew this, and this monk came to visit Wat Pah Pong one time during the hot season, and they happened to go on the alms round together to Bangkor village. And then as they leave the village and are walking down the pathway back to the Wat Pah Pong gate, Luang Por Chah deliberately hitched his robe up over his shoulder and kind of playfully didn't acknowledge that he knew this was a sore point for his brother monk. Just casually chatting and kind of forgot, seemingly, that quite consciously forgot that there was this monk will get really upset by that, just to kind of give him a teaching. So here is your beloved Ajahn, and he's doing the one thing that you really know good monks shouldn't do. So Luang Por Chah is like saying, I'm your teacher, I've got my robe hitched up, what are you going to do with your mind? So that was a direct lesson in attachment to conventions. So then the third one here, we have Kama Upadana, karma as in sense pleasure, not kamma, K-A-M-M, but karma, K-long-A-M, karma, sense pleasure. So attachment to sense pleasure is where we call something that is visually attractive or pleasant tasting, or a sound that we like. We call that we call that good, and we want to have more of it. So that's a fairly obvious area of attachment for many people, because when something is pleasant, then the drift from recognizing, oh, this is a pleasant taste or a pleasant sound or a pleasant shape, to like, this is good, this is beautiful, this is delicious, and therefore more of this would be better. So attachment to sense pleasure is learning the difference between liking and wanting. Kajamai? So that we can like something and say, this is delicious. Do I really need any more? Or that's a beautiful sound. Do I have to be listening to it all the time? That's a very attractive, a beautiful color, a beautiful physical form. Do I have to be staring at it? Do I have to have that in my home? So liking is not the same as wanting. So that's where Vedana and Sanya can be very peaceful. We can taste something delicious. We can hear a lovely sound. We can see a beautiful form. We can have a very delightful sensation, and we don't have to make anything of that. We don't have to say that's bad or wrong, but we can, because we can know this is delicious. This is say beautiful. This is attractive. This is a color that is really appealing. Full stop. Don't have to. Therefore, I have to own it. Therefore, I want more of it. Therefore, I should have this around. One very significant dialogue that took place between the young Ajahn Sumedho and Luang Por Chah was, I don't know how many of you have been to Wat Pah Pong or went there in the 60s or 70s, I lived there in 1979 for a period of time. But, forest monasteries are supposed to be very plain and simple environment. Wat Pah Pong had this kind of bleakness. It was very simple, very plain, but like really plain, really simple. And so it's a very undecorated life there. So it's quite a harsh environment. And the local other local monks would say, 3 months at Wat Pah Pong is like 10 years at any other monastery. So it's kind of emotionally quite challenging. It's very, very plain, very, very simple, very bleak and sort of a barren environment. Quite deliberately, Luang Por Chah was proud of the fact that Wat Pah Pong had the worst food in the world. And if it improved, he would scold the cooks and say, no, you're making it too delicious. It must be more nasty. So anyway, so life at Wat Pah Pong is very kind of plain and undecorated. And as junior monks and novices, then you'd be very far away from the lay people. But in this time, Ajahn Sumedho was the only foreigner there. So he was a bit like a kind of white elephant. Like, wow, or a white alligator, whoa, have you seen the white alligator? So people would be interested that this big white monk that was this rumor, it's true, there's an American monk at Wat Pah Pong. Wow. So Ajahn Chah was quite protective of the young Ajahn Sumedho, but every so often, because it was also a cause of faith, that people thinking, wow, there's an American who wants to be a monk here in the Isan, in Ubon. Wow. Yeah, we're at the end of the world. This is the bottom of the list of development. We're the kind of bottom of the barrel. But this American wants to come and be a monk here, this really tough monastery. Well, no, Asajan, this is really something powerful. So Luang Por Chah realized that it could be a cause of faith and encouragement for people. So once in a while, he would ask the young Tan Sumedho to come and sit with him or meet people if they wanted to talk with him. So on this occasion, there was this group of nursing students from the Ubon hospital, student nurses. So these are all teenage girls, kind of 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. And with their teachers, the matrons and ward sisters, the kind of tough older nurses who are their teachers and trainers. But this whole crowd, like 40 or 50 young, so teenage nursing students. So they all came along with their kind of perfectly sparkling uniforms, white and turquoise uniforms in Ubon they had in those days. And so they're all sitting very, very properly. And Luang Por Chah is giving a Dhamma talk and answering questions, and the young Tan Sumedho is sitting at his side. And then people had questions for him, then he would respond a little bit in the Thai that he had at that time. So at the end of that, so it was a very unusual situation for the young Tan Sumedho being so close to such a large number of women. And again, in the very sort of plain environment, the sort of bleak environment of Wat Pah Pong is quite a sort of sensory input to be so close to a lot of people of the opposite gender and to be engaging and having conversation and so on. So at the end of that time, when the nurses and students and the teachers had all paid their respects and departed, Luang Por Chah, and in the Isan, the Northeast, people are very, very straightforward about body functions, birth, death, sexual desire, and so on. It's very easy subjects of conversation, very kind of natural and straightforward. And so Luang Por Chah turned to the young Sumedho and said, so Sumedho, what did that do to your mind? Being so close to all these attractive young women for a couple of hours. And then the young Ajahn Sumedho replied, chop, damn my owl. And so Luang Por Chah thought, oh, this lad is going to go far. This one has got some panya. So, and he was so impressed with Ajahn Sumedho's response, even as a very young monk, like he'd only been a monk for a couple of years, that for the next 2 or 3 weeks, he used that as a theme for Dhamma teaching, chop, damn my owl. So it wasn't like he was pretending that there wasn't an effect. You're living a celibate life. There's very little anything that's sort of interesting or stimulating at all. Suddenly, whoomph, there's a whole crowd of people of the opposite gender, close by. So he wasn't pretending that there wasn't an effect, but and that there was, the signals of attraction going off. But he also recognized, well, it's just liking, chop, damn, but I don't want. So for the people who don't speak Thai, chop means to like, ao means to want. So what he said was, I like, but I don't want. And Luang Por Chah was extremely impressed, and I said, and used that as a theme. So in terms of kamupadana, attachment to sense pleasure, then this is a very helpful principle. I like, but I don't want. It can be an aspiration that, yeah, I do want, I really want. But to at least hold that up and say, well, there is that possibility of liking and not wanting, not getting caught in it. Another example that, again, I have a memory of Luang Por Chah using this example, but you can't find it in the Pali Canon. I think it's in the commentaries, and you certainly find it in the northern Buddhist scriptures. And it comes from a time when there was a famine, and the Buddha was living in a place called Viranja. It's also the time that the first Parajika rule was laid down because of the famine as well. But so that they had very little food, and the only food that they had to eat was a kind of coarse bran that was for horses. What had happened to the horses is not mentioned, but the bran was what the monks were eating. And Venerable Ananda is sitting next to the Buddha as they're having their meal one day. And Ananda makes the comment, oh, Venerable Sir, it's so wonderful that the Tathagata, even though this is very coarse and bland food, this plain bran for horses, still the Tathagata eats it with great equanimity, even though it's kind of tasteless and hard to digest. And then the Buddha said to Ananda, not so, Ananda, not so, as he frequently did to Ananda. Not so, Ananda. The sense of taste in a Tathagata is extremely acute, and then but even though the Tathagata's sense of taste is acute, still his mind is at ease and is equanimous with those flavors. And then he took some food out of his bowl, gave it to Ananda, and then said to Ananda, "Eat this, and you will taste things as the Tathagata experiences taste." So Ananda takes this little bit of horse bran from the Buddha's alms bowl, and there's this kind of explosion of incredibly powerful flavors. Like, whoa, this is amazing! And the Buddha then kind of smiles and says, "Yes, Ananda, indeed. This is the kind of array of flavors and textures and the deliciousness that the Tathagata experiences, even with food like this horse bran. But even so, the Tathagata is not confused, not carried away, or not intoxicated by such delightful flavors." So I have a memory of Luang Por Chah telling that story. I don't know where he got it from. It's unlikely that the Mahayana scriptures had been translated into Thai, but I think it's probably there in the commentaries. But he would use that as an example. Like, a Buddha has an extremely acute sense of taste, but even though plain bran has this exotic and wonderful flavors, still the Tathagata is not confused or carried away or intoxicated by that. So then the last of the four is the kamesu vinayagatang nahi jatu gabasayang punnaretiti, not born again into this world. The pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. So that not being born again is about letting go of atta, the self view and the conceits of self. Essentially, not being so excited about your own story, not to be seeing that your life is really any more important or real than anybody else's. How could I be more important than you? Even thinking those words, something in the mind goes, but I'm me. This is my life, my story. Let me tell you about me. I think we've all been there. I certainly have, where you realize I've just been telling this person my whole life story. They got that look on their face like, oh, when's he going to shut up? How much more of this is going to be there? So attavad upadana, the clinging to self-view, clinging to your own story, being fascinated with your own life. And so, well, why is my life such a big deal? It's just a life. I like to contemplate in the graveyards in England that sometimes on a gravestone, you just have, this is Thomas Williams, born 1721, passed away 1786. That's it. Why is the person's life less significant than me standing here in the graveyard? Just, Amaro Bhikkhu, born 1956, passed away whenever. That it's just a stone marker, born this date, died that date. That's it. Ngai. Very simple, very easy. Why is this life, which is so colorful and so important and so me, really more significant or more real than that person who they lived and they breathed and they had a family and they were around in the world, but just born this day, died that day? That's it. So just as a way of getting a perspective on our own story, our own self, and so many of the teachings are about anatta, about letting go of these various different kinds of selfing. And I already talked in this group about the owning self, the etang mama, then the being self, eso hamasmi, the I am feeling, the narrative self, like the atta, that my story, my age, my gender, my name, my occupation, all of that. Other kinds of self, the deciding self. It really feels like there's me making a decision, me making a choice, the deciding self. None of these selves really exist, but we often believe they do. The sense of me who's deciding, me who's experiencing, the one who feels, the feeling self or the experiencing self. And you could make a long list, but these are all different ways that this atta gets formed and strengthened. The essence of vipassana practice, vipassana meditation, right at its very heart, is cultivating this insight into not self, to see all these things that are taken to be who and what we are, this the feeling owning and being and choosing, and the story that we have, and so on. It's to challenge those, to look at those, and to see that even in a spiritual context, is that I want to break free of self-view. I want to free my heart. I want to be enlightened. This is the best thing I can do with my life. But notice how much I and me there is even in that. I want to be free. I want to be enlightened. I want to get rid of all my egotistical habits. Then there'll be me who's enlightened, and that'll be great. No, it won't, because you're still there. There's still the me who's claiming attainment. So Luang Por Sumedho used to often say, if we have the context for practice of I'm an unenlightened person who's got to do something now in order to become enlightened in the future, it's wrong view. You're establishing the practice on I am a person. The first of the 10 samyojana, the 10 fetters, is Sakaya Ditti, that's self-view. Like, no, we're not a person. That seems to be the case, but Sakaya Ditti is the attachment to the body, the personality, and that's the first obstacle. And in the vipassana practice and in the daily reflections, the body is not self, feelings are not self, perceptions are not self, mental formations are not self, sense consciousness is not self. This is not who and what we are. So if we set that idea as the context, I am an unenlightened person who needs to do something now to become enlightened in the future, then it's like we're trying to be an enlightened person, but the person is the prison. The person is the obstacle, It works very well in English because I is like a vertical line. I. It's like the bars of a prison. Like, so that the person can't be liberated. The citta can be liberated from being limited by the person. When all those eyes, when the bars fall away, then the citta is liberated, but the citta is not an individual. It's not a person. It's not self. My mind tends to work in words. I'm a wordy kind of a person, you might have noticed. So, and it doesn't come up with mental imagery very often, very, very rare. So, Luang Por Sumedho is quite different. His mind produces all kinds of colors and forms, and he's brilliant at visualizing things. He can write whole sentences in his mind and see the words kind of written up in his mind, like let go, let go, let go, and in different colors, and he can go rearrange. So he would talk quite comfortably. I really like pink, so I just fill my mind with pink, like kind of purpley pink, but that's really I like pink. And he could literally just imagine like a certain shade, and then adjust the shade to what and then sit with that sort of pink nimitta in his mind. Is completely unimaginable to me. I can think the word pink, but actually creating shapes and colors, my mind can't do. So it's extremely rare that my mind would come up with any kind of visual image. But many years ago, my 10th pansa, 10th reigns as a monk, I was able to spend in a kuti, 3 months in a hut in the forest at Chithurst Monastery in England. We only had one kuti at that time, so we'd take it in turns to use it. So I've been by myself in this kuti for a long, long time and doing a lot of formal meditation every day. And then at a certain point, I've been doing a lot of sitting, and my mind was very, very quiet. And this visual image came up, which was very surprising, because usually I just see the back of my eyelids. So, and in this image, it was as though I was in the mouth of a cave, a thumb. And so the outside the cave, there was a night sky filled with stars. And so I'm inside the cave, and then there's the cave mouth, and you can see the stars and the night sky out there. And there's this feeling of attraction or longing to go out into the space of the great sky. And so the feeling then is I'm standing in the mouth of the cave, and as I try to go out to the stars in the open sky, I can feel this kind of chain on my leg, like a shackle around my ankle, and a chain tying me to the wall of the cave, so I can't get out of the cave and merge with the great open space of the night sky. Then feeling that chain, I can literally feel the sensation on my leg of this kind of metal clasp. And then as the mind let go of the sense of self, that I want to get out of this, but rather just letting go of the sense of self, then the chain disappeared, and there was just the kind of the mind out in the open space. Then as soon as there was a thought, oh, I've made it out into the space, and clunk, the chain came back on my ankle. Once again, I'm back inside the cave. And it was like back and forth with this mental image for quite a long time. As soon as there was me trying to get free, then there was that shackle, that kind of chain holding me back. As soon as there was a letting go of self, then the chain vanished, and there was just the great open space of the sky. And that kind of sustained itself for quite a long time, an hour or a couple of hours, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So when that came to an end, I thought, well, that was a message. It's as long as there's a me, then me trying to be enlightened, me trying to be free, me trying to be liberated, it's the me that is the chain. That's the fetter. And then I thought, oh yeah, right, self-view. And the word fetter, F-E-T-T-E-R, literally means that kind of a chain that's around your legs, your ankles. That's fettered, like handcuffs. Being fettered is having something sort of chaining you to immobilize you. So I thought, oh, this is a clue. My mind has sort of picked up the word fetter, fetter number one, Sakaya Ditti, self-view, and this mental image came up. So again, it's extremely rare for me to experience anything like that, but it was very, very helpful in terms of this attavad upadana, the clinging to self. That if the mind is framing the practice in terms of, I want to be free, I want to practice hard so I can be free, I want to be enlightened, I want to become a stream enterer, that'll be the best thing I can do. Notice all those I's and me's and minds. And when Lumpur Sumedho would emphasize how it's not me doing something now to become enlightened, I'm an unenlightened person who needs to do something now to become enlightened in the future, he'd say the alternative is be awake now, and not me being awake now, but just be wakefulness now, and that letting go of time, letting go of self, and not creating that kind of a structure. So it's subtle, not easy to recognize, but the more that those self-creating habits can be recognized and known for what they are and let go of, then the more that the genuine experience is that of freedom. It's not me getting free. It's freedom from the me. But I do acknowledge that the self-creating habits are very, very strong. Maybe one last story to share with you. This was a kind of this is definitely, don't try this at home. So, but this is a very humbling insight into self-view. So Chithurst House is like an old Victorian stone building, and it was very broken down when the Sangha moved there. No, the repairs hadn't been done for years and years. So we put a new roof on, and my job was to do the gutters, the kind of to catch the water off the roof and then feed the water down through pipes to the ground. So I was the guttering expert. Well, I had to learn how to do it. So the whole house is wrapped with scaffolding, the kind of metal bars all around the house, and it's quite high. It's like 2 stories and 10-foot ceilings inside, so that the gutters are at about 30 feet, 25, 30 feet off the ground. So I've been doing this work for about a month. It's a complicated floor plan of the house. So it took a long time to do all the gutters around the edge, and I got pretty casual climbing around in the scaffolding, and I didn't bother with a ladder a lot of the time. I just kind of climb up the bars and go here and go there, and I had my pouch of equipment. I had the string to get the level and the spirit level to measure the tilt, so that the water would run down to and flow away, and the glue and the hacksaw and such like, and to cut the guttering. And so on this particular occasion, I was climbing down from the level of the gutter to the next layer down, and I had my little spirit level in my hand, and it was a small metal spirit level with a little bubble in, and so I thought, well, I could take the spirit level, put that in my pouch, and then take hold of the bar, but yeah, why bother? So I took hold of this scaffolding bar with the spirit level in my hand, and I let go with my right hand, and I'm just holding on with my left hand. Now, there was not a lot of friction, metal on metal, and my fingers didn't reach all the way around the bar. So metal on metal, just holding on with one hand. My feet were just in the air. And so my whole weight is on my left hand, and then the fact was that as soon as I let go with my right hand, then I just dropped. So I'm about 25 feet up, and I'm falling through the scaffolding, and there's a flower bed underneath me. So there's all kinds of metal bars sticking out, and as I'm falling, the thought in my mind was, I hope no one's watching. Yeah, I could have got my head smashed on a scaffolding bar. I could have got impaled by some rebar. Landing on the ground, I could have broken my back and just been completely disabled for the rest of my life. But the thought in my mind, it was vanity. It was, I hope no one is watching, because that was a really stupid thing to do. And it was very distinct thought. Like, that was my first thought, is I'm more protective of my ego than my physical well-being. So I landed in a little box bush fortunately there was a little box hedge in the garden. That cushioned me. And I did look around. Okay, I hope no one saw. But it was like, wow, that's incredible. That is really stupid. I mean, not just stupid that I let my whole weight depend on a hand that wasn't even properly gripping the bar. That was stupid in the first place. But the fact that I cared more about my ego and not looking bad in public, even as a Buddhist monk, you're supposed to be professionally egoless. That just not looking like an idiot was more important than whether I was going to get skewered on a spike of metal or die miserably or be disabled for the rest of my life. So that was a humbling insight into self-view. That, wow, this is tough stuff. these habits, even in the face of death, it's like, I hope I look okay. So anyway, that's I think enough to share for this evening. So please consider these thoughts.